Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to share with you how to make the most of your sentiment dies and some creative ways to use them. But first, this video is part of the Hedgehog Hollow Hop. There are going to be a ton of different content creators here on YouTube sharing wonderful videos featuring little hedgehogs. All the information is going to be down in the description box, so head down there for all the information on that. I'm going to be using this Hello die. This is from Fawn. I'm going to use it across all my projects and show you 3 different ways that you can use it in kind of creative ways and not just your normal die cutting it and that's that. So this is the Scripty Hello die. Like I said, it's from Fawn, and all of my dies and products, everything I'm using, inks, it's all going to be listed down in the description box. If you have any questions, you can head down there. A lot of information down in that description box today. For my first card, I'm going to do a little bit of a die cut inlay with a hidden sentiment in it. It's got a lot going on, but it looks very simple. It's not overwhelming, I promise. The first thing I want to do is ink blend a sky background. I'm ink blending on some plain white cardstock. This measures 3 inches by 2.5 inches, and I also have cut a piece of green cardstock, which you'll see in a moment, to the exact same size. I am using my Amazon makeup brushes that I love for ink blending. I've done a review on these. I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner. And I'm using Catherine Pooler inks. I started with It's a Boy, and then at the very bottom I'm going to blend in a little bit darker blue, which is something borrowed, and that's going to create my sky. Now, like I said, I also cut a piece of green cardstock. This is from Basil, and it's got a little bit of a dot texture on it. On very simple cards like this, I like to bring in different textures, just different things to kind of make a very simple card a little bit more interesting. I want to overlay these 2 dies or these 2 pieces of cardstock right on top of each other, and I'm going to position my sentiment where I want it to end up. I'm not going to cut it yet, but why I'm doing that is because I want my grass border to go straight through the center of that hello sentiment that I'm using. So I placed it down and then placed the Lawn Fawn Grassy border die right over the top of that in the middle. Then I can go ahead and place my die down, remove that hello die, and run these 2 through my die cutting machine. This isn't going to cut through 2 thick pieces of cardstock at once. At least it didn't for me and my machine. So it puts a nice little ridge in your cardstock underneath, so you can pop it right back in like a puzzle piece and cut the bottom layer after you've cut the top. But that way you know both pieces of cardstock are going to be cut exactly the same, and that's super important when you're doing die cut inlay. You want them to fit together just like a puzzle would, as you can see here. Now it's time to put these 2 together and create a little background scene. I'm using liquid glue to do this. I find it easiest with liquid glue. I've got that little bit of playtime to move things around, peel things up if they don't go exactly how I want them to, that kind of thing. So I'm using the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive for this. Any liquid glue would do. You just don't want to overuse it and get a warpy cardstock. You're going to be doing a little bit more with this, a little bit more glue, so use thin layers. I'm gluing both layers, both pieces of cardstock, onto a piece of computer paper. The thinner, the better with this, because you are still going to need to die cut again, and you don't want to have to run this through your die cutting machine over and over and over. It will end up picking up little cut marks and things like that, so the least amount of times you can run this through your die cutting machine, the better. So use thinner cardstock or use copier paper like I'm doing to glue everything onto. I put an acrylic block on top of that, and I let that sit aside to dry. You want that to dry before you run it through your die cutting machine, or all your glue is going to squish out and you're going to end up with a mess. So while I had that going and drying off to the side, I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn Hedgehog stamp set to start creating my little hedgehogs. The whole point of this hop is to celebrate Hedgehog Hollow, and of course their little mascot is a hedgehog. So I am using these little guys right here, and I'm stamping them all in Memento Tuxedo black ink. This is a super small stamp set from Lawn Fawn, so it's a great price. Again, everything I'm using is going to be listed down in the description box below. I use Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp these because I'm using some alcohol markers to quickly color them in. I'm not going to show you all my coloring. As a matter of fact, I'm only going to show you the coloring on this one card that I did, and also just the tops of my little hedgehogs. There are much more talented colorists on this hop than myself who can give you many more tips and tricks along the way. I like to choose different browns for the tops of my little hedgehogs, and instead of coloring them in like I would normally with shadows and that kind of thing, I like to just go ahead and use a flicking motion and create little flicks. You'll see it up close on this card once it's all finished, but I like to use different browns and layer them up and create all those different textures and colors like you would see on a real hedgehog. If you have trouble coming up with color combinations, things like that, how you want your hedgehogs to look, Google's going to be your best friend. Google pictures of hedgehogs, find some different ones that you like, and take inspiration from those colors and the photos and that kind of thing. Now, once I had my little guys colored, it was time to cut them out. I am using the matching die set for this. These could easily be fussy cut. I just find it easier, and this Stampin' Die set is so stinking cheap that I went ahead and just bought the dies. I normally don't, but again, these were super cheap. So I'm going to go ahead and run these through my die cutting machine. Whenever I run through matching dies, I like to just tape above the die, nothing connected to the inner portion. The worst thing you can do is to have that tape rip your colored image once you get it all said and done and die cut out. You've already colored it and then you have your tape rip it. So I like to just tape outside of the die. There they are, all cut out, ready to go on my card. I also die cut 3 little hearts. I didn't end up using them on this card, but I will use them on the next 2 that I do. So while my die cut machine is out, I have my background all dry now. The glue is set. You want that glue to be dry. Again, it's going to squish out if it's not, and then it gets all ugly. I've done it way too many times. So make sure your glue is dry, and then go ahead and place that hello die down. Again, I wanted it to run right through where the sky and the grassy border meet. I'll go ahead and place that right down and give it a tape. I'm using some well-loved tape here. This is going to get quite a lot of pressure, so you don't want your tape to get really pressed down and then again rip your background. Nothing worse than having it rip right at the last minute. So use some well-loved tape or just place it down very carefully and don't use anything to hold it down. Just be super careful. So once I had that run through, I'm going to go ahead and save all those pieces. You want even the inside pieces of the little L's and the E and the H. Make sure you save all the pieces. We're going to inlay those. I also am going to go ahead and take that same hello die and die cut it several times from black cardstock. I die cut it about 4 more times, and this is going to give me that chipboard effect that I love to do. You could use craft foam if you wanted to and pop it up that way. However, I find that I have the best luck with using cardstock. I'm also going to go ahead and die cut some clouds for my scene. Again, I'm going to go with a different texture here. I'm using the Deco Foil Flock Sheets. This is in the white. And I find, again, just adding those different textures, different looks to really simple cards, help them stand out and just add so much interest in the littlest possible ways. For this hello die, like I said, I want to create that chipboard look. You could use fun foam. I find it never works for me. It always loses its shape a little bit and never seems to fit just right. So I like to build mine up with cardstock. I'm using the black cardstock, like I said, to dye. I die cut it 4 times, and I just use a liquid glue, very thin amounts, very little amounts, on the die cut itself, and then layer them up one on top of the other. This seems like it would take more time than the foam, but I find this actually works out faster for me than using something like the craft foam. Now, once I had all of my black die cuts popped up, I want to go ahead and add the top die, which is the one that I die cut from the background. Again, just using that liquid glue, popping it right up. You do want to make sure this one's nice and lined up, and I like to clean up any glue that smushes out just with my finger or with that quick sticks tool I've been using. For the background, I needed something to attach everything to. So I used this Cat Scrappiness zigzag rectangle die set to die cut a quick rectangle that's slightly larger that's going to be my mat for my background. That's going to give me a place to attach everything instead of attaching it to the card base. And I ended up using this die set across all 3 cards, so you'll see it again in the future in this video. I'm adding liquid glue to the back of that background, and I'm going to go ahead and place it right down on top of that white cardstock zigzag rectangle that I die cut. Then I use the same liquid glue to go ahead and inlay that hello die. That's going to pop up a little bit and raise up. Then you've got that black behind it, so it makes it stand out even more. It adds almost a fake shadow to it. I then inlaid all the little pieces right inside. So I put the little H's circle back in, the inside of the L's back in, and then the background was done. I had this beautiful hidden die cut right inside there. So I added the little hedgehogs on either side of the hello, and then I added some clouds right up on top. And those again were cut from the deco foil, the flocking sheets, which are so much fun and add just the littlest bit of texture to your cards. I absolutely love the way this card turned out. It's a lot of white, but having that hidden die cut, all those different textures, really helps it pop. Now my next card, I'm going to do some masking. You're going to get a little bit of a product review here. Normally I use this stamping masking paper from Ink and Inkadoo. I am actually going to be trying these Amazon Basic shipping labels. I wanted to give them a try for masking because you get so much bang for your buck with these. These are 8.5 by 11 sheets. However, they are cut down the middle, so they end up being 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. You can cut these right down the middle and end up with 4.25 by 5.5 pieces. You get 100 of these sheets, so 200 labels. They also, one of my biggest pet peeves with the Ink and Inkadoo masking paper is it is not sticky enough for me. I like to do a lot of masking. I like it to stick, and I like it to stick well. Mine always peel up, especially if I'm ink blending over the top. It always seems to pop up and mess up my projects. So these are stickier. However, you're going to see how they work. I happen to love these, but if you don't like sticky things, you're not going to like these. Just word of warning. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of this out. I've cut it slightly larger than 4.25 by 5.5, so A2 size. And I'll run that through my die cutting machine with that Lawn Fawn Grassy border die. These do die cut beautifully, just like the Ink and Inkadoo masking paper. The backing paper is just a little bit harder, I would say, than the masking paper to get off. So I use that quick sticks tool, or not the quick sticks tool. I use it is the quick sticks tool. I can't keep my tools straight anymore. I also went ahead and die cut that Hello, Scripty Hello from Lawn Fawn from that same masking paper. Again, this is a delicate die cut. It die cut beautifully with that shipping label paper. So this is super sticky. You do want to go ahead and give it a little priming up against something that you're wearing or something with a little bit of lint on it. I use the arm of my shirt. You can also use like the stomach area of your shirt, your pant leg, anything like that. Just get a little bit of that stick gone if you want to. I forgot to do it on one of my steps, which you'll see later on, and it didn't end up ripping my paper. It's just easier to get off if you do go ahead and remove some of that stick. I went ahead and applied that grassy border to the bottom of my zigzag rectangle. I used the same die set, the same exact die that I used beforehand. I'm also going to do the same thing with the Hello die, remove a little bit of that stick, and even though this is quite a delicate die cut, if I were to stick that up against the sleeve while it was on the Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper, it would rip on me. It didn't rip here, which was a nice little surprise. So it is very delicate, however, it holds up well. I went ahead and placed that down on the top where the sky is going to be. And then I also masked off the little zigzag portion of this right outside those stitch lines to keep a nice white edge. For my background, I'm going to be going ahead and stenciling. So I am using this Plaid Fringe stencil from the Crafters Workshop. It's one of my new favorite stencils. And I'm just going to tape it up at the top and create a little hinge. And you'll see why. I'm using, again, my ink blending brushes, the makeup brushes that I love so much. And then I'm using something borrowed, again, from Catherine Pooler. You're going to see me use a lot of the same products across all three of these cards. I'm just using them in different ways to create different looks, which is kind of nice. For my sky, I'm going to go ahead and ink blend through that stencil right onto the background. This is going to give me some nice texture. One thing I wish I would have done differently, I wish I would have used a lighter blue first without the stencil. That would have given me more of a harsh edge around that hello and completely surrounded the hello, so it would stand out better on the finished card. You can still read it. It still works just fine. However, that is something I wish I would have done. And I later found that out from the mistake I made coming up. So I went ahead and used that hinge on the top to raise up that stencil so I could then take off my mask down at the bottom, because now I need to ink blend the bottom portion of my little scene. So before I take off that mask, I'm going to actually put down the top portion of that grassy border die that I die cut. This is going to mask off all the area up top that has the blue on it. And I like to keep that bottom mask on so I can fit it in just like a puzzle piece and put it down before I remove that bottom one. Now, did you see me put that down? I did not de-stick that on my shirt or anything. I got in too big of a hurry on this portion. I had a kid to pick up from school, so I was hurrying here, and that's when I start to make mistakes. I should know better, but I never learn. Now with this shipping label paper, it does stick down more than your masking paper, so you do want to take your time when peeling this up. I'm doing it very slowly here because I wasn't sure how it was going to react. This is my first time using it. It does stick down very well. However, it didn't rip my paper at all. Even along where the stitching is, where the edges of the die cut are, I had no problems. I wouldn't reuse this. However, this is a lot cheaper than the Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper is. So that really doesn't bother me. I mean, you get a lot more and it sticks a lot better. Now, before I went on and ink blended the bottom portion of this, I did remember to clean my stencil. I just put a piece of extra paper right underneath that stencil and gave it a quick wipe right along the bottom there. That way my green and blue aren't going to mix whenever I go and ink blend the bottom portion. Now, I went ahead and grabbed the Grass Skirt ink from Catherine Pooler. This is a nice green ink, and I started ink blending, and then I realized that I had forgot to mask off the edges like I did beforehand on the top of this card. So I went ahead and masked off all the area outside of the stitching. That's not a big deal. I went ahead and just quickly moved up my stencil, added on that masking tape, and then later on, once this ink has kind of settled down and dried a little bit, I'll go ahead and remove that with a sanding eraser. But here's where I messed up again. I didn't put my stencil down before I started ink blending. So I thought about it. I thought, well, do I just start this card over? Really, this was kind of a happy accident. I love the way this turned out so much more than the top. So what I did was I actually just did a very light coating of that green ink without the stencil down. So just kind of filled up that bottom portion with the ink. Then I'll go ahead and flip that stencil right back down over the top, and because I use that hinge, it's going to line up perfectly every time I pop it back down. It's not that big of a deal to raise it up and put it down. And then I'll go ahead and do a heavier hand of ink right through that stencil. This creates so much more definition. You still have that texture from the stencil, but it gives you those nice harsh lines so you can really see where everything's at. So if you were to recreate this card, I would suggest doing that on the top as well. Now it's time to remove that top portion or that top mask. So I'm going to gently pull that down. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of masking, overlaying and overlaying and overlaying, this is very thin. So I didn't have any trouble with that. However, whenever you pull this up, it's going to pull up the mask underneath it. I had that hello mask down, remember? And then I put down the grass on top of that. It pulled up both masks whenever I pulled it up. I didn't de-stick this mask either, like against my shirt, but it still pulled up perfectly fine, no ripping or anything. There is a closer look with everything removed. I love the way this turned out. Even with all my mistakes, it still turned out wonderful. Like I said, I would go ahead and use the same technique that I used on the bottom on the top. Adding that little bit of blue to the background is really going to help that sentiment stand out more. I colored in some more little hedgehogs, die cut those out, and added those little hearts that I didn't use on the first one. This I popped onto an A2 top folding card base, and that card was finished. Again, super simple, but so much fun. Now my third one. This one is probably my favorite card. I wanted to do a stitched sentiment. And Lawn Fawn has a Hello Stitch Sentiment die. However, whenever I made my order, I completely blanked and forgot to add it to my cart. So I thought, I'll just make my own. So I went ahead and created a little background again with that same zigzag border die, add a little ink to it. Then I die cut that Hello die, same one I've been using. I die cut that from some computer paper. Now to the back of that computer paper, I'm going to go ahead and add on some removable adhesive. This is the Tombow removable adhesive runner. I'll leave a link to it down in the description box below. I'll go ahead and peel that up, and then I'll place this little sentiment right down over the top of my cardstock where I want my stitch sentiment to end up being. If you don't have any removable adhesive, you could also use a full sticky back Post-it note. You could also use masking paper for this. I just wanted to give you another option with that removable adhesive. Now, once I had that stuck down, I am going to go ahead and use my craft pick. This one is from Tim Holtz. It is a retractable craft pick, and I am going to punch holes to create my sentiment. You can just go freehand if you wanted to through here. However, I found it easier to go ahead and draw in some little dots for myself. That way I had a guide of where I wanted this to go. My suggestion for this, start at the high points of your letters, then fill in around those high points. So high points where the letters connect. So like you have your little L's down at the bottom there where they intersect the bottom two loops. Go ahead and put a little dot there. Put a little dot at the very highest point of that L and then fill in around. You don't want to overdo it with the dots, but you also don't want to underdo it. So play around with this technique a little bit. Once I had all my dots in place with my pencil, I'm going to go ahead and use that craft pick and just start poking through my cardstock. I put a piece of thick craft foam underneath to catch my craft pick so I don't damage my working surface underneath there. If you don't have craft foam or you don't have thick craft foam, layer up a couple pieces underneath. You can also use a cutting board or something like that underneath. Just something so you're not going to damage your work surface because this will poke through. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, but I did want to leave this all in the video so you could see how easy this is just to create any stitch sentiment you want. So if you have a celebrate die, if you have a sympathy die, excuse my head in the frame there, I had to look straight through, but you get the idea. You can use any sentiment die for this and create that stitched look. You could also use any die for that matter and create a nice stitch look. I have some ideas for that I'll be sharing in a future video. Once I had all of my dots down or poked through, I'm going to go ahead and remove that piece of computer paper. It's removable adhesive, so it just rubs away any residue that's remaining. And there I've got my little hello stitches ready to be filled with some thread. For my thread, I'm going to be using some floss. This is just the DMC floss. I have a bunch of different colors because I've made the felt play food for my kids in the past. I've also made some quiet book pages when they were younger, that kind of thing. So I have a ton of this just laying around. I went ahead and grabbed some black, and I'm going to keep all of this connected. I'm not going to pull any strings out or anything like that. I'm not doing any certain number of strands. It's the 5 strand I'm using here. And for the stitching, I'm just going to use a quick back stitch. What I like to do is go ahead and take my end of my floss. I don't connect to my actual needle. I'll show you why in just a moment. But my one end I do tape down to the back side of my cardstock. That way, no matter how hard I pull, it's not going to pull out. I just use a piece of Scotch tape for that. Then I go ahead and start stitching. I go up and then down, and then come up through the next hole, back through the previous one. It's a lot easier to see. If you have any trouble with stitching, or if you don't know how to stitch, there are tons of YouTube videos that are very clean, concise, and easy to follow. That's how I learned how to do all my stitching, because I didn't have anyone to teach me. So go on YouTube, do a few searches of simple stitches, and you can be doing this in no time. I'm also using an embroidery needle, which is a little bit larger than your regular size needle. I find that easier to thread, and also it holds the floss much, much better than a regular needle trying to get so much floss through. Now, the reason I don't connect to my needle is because of instances like this. Now, on this O, I went through the wrong hole. So instead of trying to thread my needle back through that kind of thing, I just drop the string from my needle. Then I can pull out my thread from the stitch that I didn't mean for it to go through on the back. I can do as many as I need to this way, and I don't have to rethread that needle back through the paper. Then I can go ahead, rethread my needle with the floss, and then just go right back to stitching. It's no big deal if you mess up this way. I know sometimes I drop my thread from my needle, that kind of thing, but so much easier just to let it hang free. So once I had that done, I had this beautiful stitched hello sentiment right on my card, and I didn't need any special die to do it. I did it all with the same exact die. So with this die so far, I've done some hidden die cutting, I've done some masking, and now I've done some stitching, all with a very cheap sentiment die. I went ahead and taped the end of that down, added a little Scotch tape to keep that in place, and there is that sentiment. I absolutely love, love, love the way this one turned out. Now I wanted to add a little something extra to this background, so I'm going to create a very quick rainbow background, and I want to show you how I did that too, even though this isn't part of the sentiment techniques. I'm using Catherine Pooler inks. I'm using Rock and Red, Limoncello, Grass Skirt, Something Borrowed, and Flirty Fuchsia. I'll be using my Amazon makeup brushes again to do my blending, and I am using painter's tape. This is all the same width of painter's tape, believe it or not. I just put it in my paper trimmer and cut out the size piece I want. That way, I don't have to have a bunch of different sizes of painter's tape laying around. I can get really thin strips, I can get really thick strips. It really is up to you. Another suggestion with making rainbow backgrounds like this, I cut out the orange in my color combination here. This helps me when lining up all of my different colors. So normally when I create a rainbow, I do include that orange color. However, I have found that my rainbow is always lopsided. I always have more red, less blue, more blue, less red, that kind of thing. So cutting out that orange allowed me to know that green is my center color. That way I can go corner to corner with my green. I know yellow, I can go from the middle out basically with this. I know where the colors need to end up being on my card. I don't have to do any figuring out any other way. So just something that helped me kind of plan out my rainbow. Maybe consider dropping it down to 5 colors if you have trouble like me. Now once I had that completely covered with color, I removed all that painter's tape, and I had this gorgeous background ready for my little card that I made, or my little background that I made before. So what I did was I added a little bit of a grassy border right underneath that hello sentiment. I also added my little hedgehogs that I colored in die cut with that same Lawn Fawn set. My hearts I also added with a little bit of pink Pico sparkle embellishment from Imagine to give them that little extra shine. I added some white cardstock clouds dots on the top, and that card was finished. All I had to do was pop up that background onto that rainbow card base, and that's it. Super duper simple. Here's a look at all 3 cards. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It is a long one. However, I wanted to include all the steps so you could try these techniques out yourself. That's going to do it for me today. Don't forget to check out all the information in the description box for this hop, and keep on hopping and having fun. Happy crafting, everyone!